First of all, to make it live forever, we need to grease this fitting right here. This is super important. This is a crucial thing that gets forgotten a lot of times, and it's super common in two-stroke, especially Yamahas and Suzukis. This is the swivel bracket that basically controls the steering of the engine. If this tube here doesn't have clean grease in it, they will take in water and that will eventually corrode and freeze this bracket up. We've seen it a ton of times where an engine is hard to turn because this tube went dry and corroded up. So we need to grease this thing often because you'll see right here how dry it is. And then if we look up here as well, it's kind of hard to see because of the light, but it is also very dry up there. Let me try and go on the other side. So you see how it's looking like it's dry and there's old dirty grease? What happens is that dry grease will seize up and then the engine won't be able to turn because it will be seized up inside that tube. So when we grease it, we want to look at the top and we want to look at the bottom, and we want to push a grease in there until water comes out of there or old dirty grease comes out, and then we can clean that old dirty grease off and get new fresh grease all the way up and down that tube. All right, so it's already hard. You can see the grease is already starting to squirt out of my grease gun. That means this thing is already packed up and I can't put any more grease in there. Now, if you put too much grease in there and nothing comes out, you need to stop putting grease in there because the thing has already gone too far and it is dried up, and you're just pushing old dry grease from this fitting. You're pushing old dry grease down here and it is tightening up around the base of this, which will actually make the steering a little bit worse. Same thing for the top. So what we need to do is clean all this stuff off to try and get to where we can get this old grease to be pushed out, or if it's gone too far, you will need to heat this tube up. Sometimes we even have to trim the engine up and drill a hole in the tube and then put a little hole in there so we can put another grease fitting at the top in order to heat the tube up and get all that old grease out. You can see how dry it is. Look at that. That grease is just like, it's almost turned to like a rubber type substance because it's so dry. So let me try and pick some of that stuff out. And then look at this mounting bolt too. That's why we need to keep things oiled and lubed and greased. Okay, so we were able to get some grease to pop out of there once we got a little bit of it cleaned. So basically what we need to do now, this will actually be fine. We're going to clean this grease off. I didn't see any come out on the bottom. I would have liked to seen some come out of the bottom, but this, we know we've at least got fresh grease up to here. We're going to clean that off and we'll go run the engine a couple times. We just now need to make sure that we grease this maybe once or twice every other time we use it, just so that way we can get all this old grease to work its way out of there. The more we use it, the more we heat it up, the more it goes back and forth. It will break any of that old grease up and get out of there. So this is a good spot to be. That's where you want to be. You want to see that grease to be pushing out the top, and then you also want to see some come out the bottom, but you know, sometimes it won't. So that is going to be that for that. There is also going to be a grease fitting here for our steering. So there's that one, and then there will also be two more up here. Let me show you those. So we've got a grease fitting right here, and we've got another one right here, and that is for our trim unit. So we want to make sure that we get both of these greased up pretty regularly. Again, you want to see some old grease come out with some new grease. Wipe it off, clean it off, and then that way these grease fittings will continue to take grease, and that will be good. Another thing is right here, these handles. So right here they have a little fitting at the top. We can put our grease gun on there and grease these handles to make sure that these will take grease. Sometimes they will not take grease, and if they won't take grease, what we need to do is take the 10 mil off here, take this handle out, take that out so we can clean it, put all this grease on the inside. It's just been too long since anybody has greased it, and everything is kind of locked up. That'll be the same thing for the front or any grease fitting that won't work. If the Zerk won't work, then we need to take the Zerk fitting out and move the ball around to get it to take grease. See how we got the handle out? Now we can just kind of clean all this rust and this old dirt and stuff off of here, and that way we can just put fresh grease on there, stick the handle back in there, tighten it up. We also were able to push through this to get all the old dirt and corrosion and stuff that was stuck in there. So now grease will actually get down in here. We'll clean this bushing up, grease it, and stick it in there, and she'll be like brand new. There we go. Now the back is all done, nice and smooth and easy. Also, I like to pack a little bit of grease in there to keep anything from getting down in there. And that is how you want it to take grease. So you see how we put grease in here. There's a little bit pushed out there, a little bit pushed out here at the handle. So you can see that that is taking grease, and that is perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. Same thing down here. See the grease coming out right there. Also some coming out right there. Kind of hard to see in the shadow, but you put grease in here and it came out there. That is what we want to see. Now we just need to clean off all this old grease. I'll leave some on the top of that one to keep it going, and then we'll move on to the next thing. We talked about this when we got this thing running, but these springs here on the throttle control valves, these will tend to get sticky sometimes, so you want to make sure that you keep these nice and lubed up with some nice lubricating oil like Kroll, something like that. And then also it is connected to this down here, which is our oil pump. The oil pump is down there. It's kind of hard to see, but that needs to be lubricated as well. Best thing to do is just kind of coat it and just make sure it stays coated and lubed up, and that will keep it operating. Yamahas, you don't have to worry too much about them. They don't really fail, and if they do fail, they fail into the fully, full oiling position. But other than that, if you got a Johnson or something like that, I would consider even getting rid of the oil pump. Yamahas are pretty good, but make sure that you keep that thing oiled and lubed, and that will make it last for a long time and live forever. Two Strokes love spark plugs, so you do need to change these quite often. They will be specific to the engine, and they will also need to be gapped. So when you get some spark plugs, look at these bad boys. These are about as old as the engine. So you get these, pull them out. Generally, if they have that thing in there, the little case, they are pre-gapped, but just in case you want to check them, feeler gauges, I have not gapped a plug in so long, but you want to put the feeler gauges between the spark plug to gap it to make sure that it is the right gap. Oh, there you go. Make sure that they are gapped properly, and then once you get them gapped, then we can put them into the engine. Normally you do want to put some anti-seize on the spark plugs, but let me show you something. On a lot of two strokes like this, if you look at all that oil and all that stuff that comes out of there. So generally I'm not going to put any anti-seize on there because there's enough oil and stuff here that's going to lubricate that, and these don't really get seized into the head. Overheating a two-stroke can be catastrophic, so we want to make sure that we do something with the thermostat here. We're going to take the thermostat housing off and take the thermostat out, check it, replace the gaskets, and put a new thermostat in there. Here is the poppet valve. You can see a bunch of junk and all kinds of stuff built up on there, all kinds of built up into there. So we're going to take the thermostat out as well, but this poppet valve, this spring, that's not in the best shape. should probably replace that. I don't have one, so these housings right here, you see all that salt and buildup and junk inside of that. We need to clean all that stuff off, get all that junk out of there, so that way you can have good clean water flow throughout the head. Also in here, we need to get in here and get all of this junk out of here as well. You don't want any of that stuff in the engine. We need to get out as much as we can. If you have a lot more than this doesn't go as deep. I can stick a pick in there and pull it out, but if you've got a ton of stuff in there, then what you're going to need to do is hook up to the garden hose, turn the water on, and it's going to push all that stuff out, and you can let it all roll out the back, try and catch some and push it out so that way it's not in the cowling. But that's what you're going to need to do if you have more stuff that you can't just pick out. So this doesn't look that clean, but this is clean enough for a thermostat housing. What I do want to do though is actually I would like to do the same thing. I'm going to take this off, and I would like to run some Salt-A-Way through here and see what Salt-A-Way does with all of this stuff. If you want to clean this up more, you can. If you put this back together like this, you won't have any problems, but it would be better to get as much of this buildup out of here as possible, because any of this stuff is going to potentially get caught in your thermostat housing. I'm going to try and dig a little bit more of this off of the bottom here, but yeah, any of this stuff could get caught in a thermostat, so you want to get as much of this junk out of here as possible. The main thing that you want to do when trying to clean these things is, one, you want to scrape them the least amount as possible, because when you scrape the paint off, it gets to bare metal, which causes, you know, corrosion issues. But also, you never want to scratch the surface, this mating surface. If you put a scratch in there, it can leak. You'll have to use some RTV or some Permaseal or something like that, but making sure that you do not scratch that surface is crucially important. I like to put a little bit of grease around this O-ring just to try and help keep it from sticking too hard, make it easier to get out the next time. You also want to grease up the bolts when you put them back in. Any bolt that you take out should get grease when it goes back in. Now we do need to change this strainer here. This is for the fuel. It is a strainer that we can clean, but we will remove it. I have a new one, so we're going to put a new one on there, but you can take this and just clean it out. Let me pull it out so you can see it. Here is what it looks like. You can see it's just basically like a super fine filter. You can spray that out and clean it with some like contact cleaner. Not bad. I have a new one. The new ones are like black, basically the same thing. I'm gonna put that in there, but I also just noticed I've already put the thermostat in and I forgot to put that in, so we're going to need to put that in. That's fine, because tomorrow what I want to do is take this off and I want to test it by using some Salt-A-Way and see what the inside looks like after I run Salt-A-Way for X amount of period of time, so we can check that out tomorrow. But for now, I'm just going to change this filter out, and then we will move on to doing the lower unit, because everything up here is pretty much going to be done. All that we will need to do is clean the engine and then spray it down with either some dry silicone or some YamaShield or CRC or WD-40 or anything, some kind of protectant. But I want to wash all this corrosion and dirt and stuff off first, because you just want to get all that stuff off the engine, but we'll do that at the very end. This is a shallow water type of boat, so you notice that the skeg is missing a whole lot of paint. We are actually going to go ahead and sand this down and repaint this. So when I take this off, I'll show you how to do the impeller, but I'm going to leave it off. I'm going to repaint it. We need to fill it with lube, But because it's got so much paint missing, that means corrosion can be a problem. That's what makes these anodes so important. So down here we have an anode that we need to replace. You notice that it has a grounding strap on here. That is super important to make sure that grounding strap is there and not broken. So let's replace this. It's just going to have two 10 mils on it. That's 1 bar. I'll pull that off. And then also you have this anode here, which will need to be replaced as well. Like I say, make sure you put grease on all the bolts. These trim units are notorious for leaking, so we need to make sure that we top them off. Keeping these shafts clean is very crucial to keeping these seals from leaking. If these get any kind of pitting or nicks in them, when they go in, they will cut that seal and they will leak. It looks like that one is leaking, so we will have to address that later. But these on a Yamaha are usually a 17 millimeter. We just need to crack this cap right here. Once we crack it, we can just see if we get any kind of, hopefully it's just air that comes out. If fluid comes out, you need to tighten it back up, but for us, we might need to top her off. So we'll just need to get our bottle to fill it up. Yep, I got nothing coming out, so we need to top this unit off. For the trim unit, it's pretty simple. We just need to get some ATF, put it in a ketchup bottle, and then we can squirt this into the trim unit to top off our fluid. Take our ketchup bottle, put a rag down here so we don't drip anything on the ground, and we can stick this into the hole and then fill it up. Just squeeze the fluid in there until it starts to come out. You see how it's starting to come out? Now we can just take this off, go ahead and put our cap back on there, tighten that up, and that's how you top off the trim fluid. We can clean all this off, but that takes care of our trim unit. Clean these off, get everything nice and clean. So now let's drop our lower unit and do the impeller. Dropping the lower unit is actually pretty simple. There's just 1 bolt here, 1 bolt here. We need to take this plug off there. There's a 12 millimeter there that will drop the anode with a 14 millimeter under there, and then those two, we'll pull the lower unit off, and then we can do the impeller. We also want to take the propeller off of here. So there's usually just a cotter pin. We just need to fold that tab over, pull this pin out, take the nut off, and we'll pull the propeller off so we can grease the prop shaft and grease everything in there and inspect that seal that is on the lower unit. Usually these are a 1 1/16, but on smaller ones like this one, this is a 7/8 inch. You want to put a block of wood on there like that to stop it, so when you take it off, the propeller will go there and it'll keep the prop shaft tight. That's how you break the nut free, and that's how you're going to put it back on. Let's go ahead and pull this prop off here and see what we look like. Not too shabby. So let's go ahead and drop the lower unit and take a look at what the impeller looks like. Cleaning the block is actually pretty simple. All we need is engine cleaner and a little paintbrush like this. We're going to go ahead and wherever we see that we need to do some cleaning, just kind of spray that on there. And then we're going to take our brush and we can clean all of it off. So now we just need to go around the engine and basically spray the engine cleaner on there and wipe it all down with our brush to get any kind of dirt, grime, stuff like that off of it. And then we will actually come back and rinse it off with the hose. Now you want to stay away from, the starter, the oil system. You want to make sure to not spray like this with any water. Don't get any water inside the carburetors. So, it's basically just a light rinsing to get any kind of dirt on the engine off of the engine. Like I was saying, that you want to be cautious when doing this with the water. You know, we're just trying to lightly get all that off there. Don't want to spray too much water everywhere, get in the carbs or anything like that. We're just trying to rinse off the degreaser that we put on there. You're not going to hurt anything by getting a little bit of water on everything here, but you know, you want to be not too aggressive. And again, all the water is going to come out of the holes in the bottom of the pan, so you'll be all right there. Okay. Looking good. I missed a couple spots up here, but let me get those. There we go. That is looking way better. This engine actually wasn't all that bad, but you can tell 100% a clean engine is a happy engine. All this stuff's going to dry. We just need to let it sit out here in the sun and it will air dry. Again, all the water has leaked out from down in here. You can see there's no standing water in the lower unit, or I mean inside the pan, so it's all going to drain out. And now once all this just air dries out, we can come back with our silicone, our Yamashield, our CRC, whatever we're going to put on there. And you could even towel dry this if you want, you know, dry it all off, and then we will spray it down with some anti-corrosion. But while this is drying, let's go do the impeller. We're not going to get too in depth on the lower unit because we took one completely apart and made a video about every single part that's inside the lower unit. So all we're going to do is take the housing off here. This is the water pump housing. We're going to pull this off and inspect what the impeller looks like, and we need to drain the gear lube, and based on what color the gear lube is, whether or not we need to pressure test the gear case or not. Somebody has recently been in here because you can tell with all that grease, all the grease on here, that's really good. That's a good sign. One thing I want to note, you notice how much grease is built up on the bottom of that bolt. You want to make sure that you don't get too much grease on the bottom of the bolts, because when you put the bolt down in, it's just driving that grease down in there. And if there's too much grease, there's nowhere for it to go. It will actually crack the lower unit housing right here, because you've just push grease, and then there's, you know, this much grease down there, and when you tighten that bolt up, it just pushes it down and it will actually crack the housing. So be careful with that. Make sure you clean off the bottoms of the bolts when you put them in. That way you do not get that problem. Honestly, this impeller looks really good. I would not change this. I'm going to, since I'm here, but this is a really good impeller. You notice that there is barely any flex marks on the back of the vanes. That means that this thing was recently replaced. Not a lot of rust. This is like a brand new impeller. That's perfect. So now what we need to do is go ahead and drain the lower unit oil to see if it's got any water in it. If it doesn't have any water, we're going to fill it up with gear lube. When we go to drain the gear lube, we want to make sure we crack this bolt here first. That way if there's any pressure in the gear case, it'll let it out here first without blasting it out the bottom. Crack this, it let out all the pressure, put it back in, then we'll take the bottom one out and see what the gear lube looks like. Well, that is some extremely really clean gear lube. It was probably just recently done, got an impeller, all that stuff must have just been done in the recent years before it ended up sitting. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to put the lower unit back on because I want to paint the whole thing, and that will be a whole nother video. But we need to do one more thing at the boat. The water separator, you want to make sure you get these things changed regular, because look at that. That's causing a problem. All that kind of rust and stuff like that, that will all go up to the engine and cause you all kinds of fuel problems. So make sure you change your water separators on the regular. Now you can put this stuff on as thick or as light as you would like. I personally like to give it a nice blast. and then I will come back depending on what it is. Usually with CRC, I like to kind of give it a nice little wipe down. The dry silicone, you don't really need to wipe it down, but for CRC stuff like that, it's nice to kind of give it a wipe down and get the stuff on there. Much cleaner and protected engine compared to what it was. Honestly, I like CRC more than this because it's more oily, but this is what I have on hand. So, and as you can see, that looks 100 times better. Oh, I missed a little bit of spot down in there. I could probably use a little bit more clean right there, but other than that, we're looking like a brand new engine. This thing looks phenomenal. So that is going to be how you make a two-stroke live forever.